Carl Rodriguez is the GMologist, GM extraordinaire, the GMologist.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Geomologist Presents. This is going to be part of my continuing series of why you should play. And today, we're going to discuss why you should play Hyperborea. And with me today, I have a very special guest. I know someone who really loves Hyperborea on his YouTube channel. I think they're up to like 78 to 80 sessions. And that's Daniel Norton of Bandits Keep. Thank you for joining me, Daniel, to talk about Hyperborea.
Well, thank you for having me. I like to talk.
That's great. Yeah. So on the Discord, in the Discord verse, Daniel Norton is also called it's a Bandits Keep Empire. So what platforms do you have? What are you showing out there of your various creative works? So why are you the Baron, Daniel Norton?
I am the Baron. All right, I have to move this over. So I am, I guess I got involved with the Discord and everything through Anchor. So I have a podcast, of course. Right. I also have a YouTube channel, which is what I was doing first. Two of them, if you want to. But one, I put the actual plays. That it's kind of an interesting thing because I'm not like some people push their actual plays. I just kind of put them up there so people can watch. It's not really a main part of what I do. So I separated it into two channels. That's why I did that. Plus, that way I could be called a Meteor Baron, so I could have more channels. But the other channel, I talk more about philosophy and kind of the same stuff we talk about in Anchor, like about playing, not so much the actual plays. And I find that works out pretty well. And yeah, we're almost at 80. I think we're playing tomorrow to be session 79 in Hyperborea. Oh, nice. So yeah. Yeah,
that's great. So again, thank you for joining me, Daniel. And again, like I said, we're going to talk about the game Hyperborea. You might also know it as Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea. It's on the 3rd edition now, and Jeff Talanian, the author, has shortened it to Hyperborea because I guess you could say Ass or Ash, because the Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea is a mouthful. But what I was also going to say was that I will put all those links that you give me, Daniel, in the show notes for your different podcasts and YouTube. And you should definitely, I would say, just up front, that you should go watch the actual play. Daniel has a really great group of players. He really runs the games well. They are not dull. So I think the last one was lots of burning giants and death and destruction somewhere in Vinland, I'm thinking. In Hyperborea world, which we might get to. So let's before I get into I have 4 points about why you should play Hyperborea, but I think maybe first we can talk about you could talk a little bit about your game, and then I can add in the games I've played and or run in Hyperborea and kind of the reason why it's so exciting to me, because I've had good times in these games. Tell us a little bit about your game.
So I picked up Hyperborea kind of. It was weird when 2nd edition went to the Kickstarter. I saw it, and then I realized that it was going to be 6 months or a year, whatever, how long the Kickstarter takes. And I saw that they had a 1st edition, so I bought that with the intention to run it, and then I never did. So I had the 1st edition box set. But when 2nd edition came, and then Jeffrey does a great thing where every year he kickstarts a couple of modules. So I've been doing them and building them up because I'm I want to build a whole campaign out of these modules because there are a variety of levels. And that was always my goal. And I was going to actually run it. It actually works out, I guess. I mean, good. One good thing about maybe the pandemic is that we got to play a lot more. And I roped in the group that I played with online already. And I said, we're going to start at 1st level and we're going to run through all the modules. And we actually have at this point. We've run through every printed module except for the one that just came out in the new box set, because that's 1st level. And my party is at 7th, 8th level. They've traveled all over the world. My initial thought was, this was, reading things like Conan and some of that kind of stuff. I love the idea of having, serialized adventures. So things happen, and then it cuts away, and then it comes back. So that was my original plan, was that we would play 5, 6, 7 episodes or sessions, and then cut away, play other games, whatever, then come back. But we've enjoyed it so much. We've been running continuously for, I guess, almost 2 years. It's almost 80 sessions because because holidays and sometimes people can't play and so on. So, but it's pretty awesome. I've mostly run the actual adventures. Right now, though, I'm homebrewing something. It's funny, I have it sitting in front of me, which I guess we're going to talk about based on this, which is Dwellers in the Mist. Dwellers in the Mirage by A. Merritt, who is another one of the authors. I know we're going to talk about that. There's actually, if you read a lot of weird fiction, I don't jump on the gun here. You see, and you start looking at the map, you can kind of see all these different places, which is really cool. So yeah, it's so great for that. But yeah, we've been having a great time with it, and we're high level. We're 7th, 8th level, and they're pretty damn powerful, which is cool.
So do you plan to stop them or at that cap? I think it's 12th level. You think you'll get there at 12th level? I think it's a cap, right, in the rules.
Yeah.
That's not on our plan, but I just felt
I don't. You're going to keep going. I'm not. Actually, I guess spoiler. This thing I'm homebrewing is going to be like a finale. Like what happened was the last module we ran, it kind of ends in a really vague way. It didn't have like a big ending. And I thought we can't be running a campaign for this long and have a vague ending. So I said, let me homebrew something so we can have something that's got to really wrap up some of the conflicts that we've been building. Because even though I'm not running the modules, I'm throwing my own bits of lore inside to kind of shape the world. So there's this whole kind of background of things are happening. So I wanted to kind of have something that had a good, I don't want to call it an ending. So when this is done, which I would imagine would be in maybe 10 more sessions, then whatever level they're on is where we're going to stop. I'm guessing it'll be still level 8. Or 9 maybe.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So I got into Hyperborea through Kevin Madison of Dungeon Musings. I joined a one-shot. It was like this sort of some sort of number, Echoes of Atlantis, or it looked really cool. It really held those touchstones for me about sword and sorcery, Atlantean lore. Via we'll get into that a little bit, but that's what I was drawn to, and I played this one-shot. I really enjoyed it. And then he did another one shot, and eventually that led to this campaign that we have been playing, where he made his own little pocket, which you can do. It's already exists in the world. He made a little pocket called Tule, and he had a map and everything. And we had started off doing sort of a hex crawl. We got into the politics of Tule. Eventually won ourselves a keep, and then we went through this gate that was in the keep, and now we're somewhere else. So we've been playing that for about the same time, it's about the same length that you've been playing your campaign, and it's kind of, I feel like it's on hiatus. I don't know if it's permanent, but we did get to 7th level, and you're right, 7th level is pretty powerful. Like I play an Amazonian warlock, Iphigenia Cantadoros. She shoots lightning bolts. She has a short sword and shield. She's as strong as the other fighters. It's been very fun, and I've tried one campaign where, like you, I took one of the modules that started at 1st level and tried to run it, and that went pretty well. And unfortunately, it fell apart. I feel mainly because of scheduling issues for people, which, as you know, happens. But then I picked up another one, and using you mentioned the new module, which is called the new module for the 3rd edition called the Late Trapper's Lament, and I started running the new version of Hyperborea, which is the 3rd edition. Again, we'll have all the links and titles and stuff as much as I can remember. Even the novel that Daniel just mentioned, we'll put that in the show notes as well. And I ran that adventure, and I had a technical TPK. So they didn't die. I don't want to spoil too much. They didn't die, but effectively the campaign could have ended because of what happened. But what I've done is now taken inspiration from some of the fiction that we're going to talk about and that Daniel has already alluded to. That I took an inspiration from a short story by H.P. Lovecraft. And now I'm running this campaign that's now called Shadows Out of Vinland, where the characters had amnesia. They've gotten their memories back. They don't know where the hell they are. They've been trying to figure out. And we've run a couple sessions of that, the reboot, I guess, after running Late Trapper's Lament, and it's pretty cool. I think I've been able to, again, that's why I have Daniel here, using inspiration from what he has done. To kind of string together some of the modules and some vignettes that are throughout the Hyperborea books, and put a campaign together. And I think that's what's going to be fun, is being able to travel all over the world and have these adventures. So I think, and the same time, the characters are trying to figure out what the hell happened in that missing year, right? So I think that's what's going to happen.
Nice.
So
That sounds pretty
speaking of,
awesome. Yeah.
yeah. So speaking of and it is kind of open table. And I have 2 main players, but if people ever want to, jump in, we can. And the schedule's Matt, and I might even have, like, I was actually even thinking of, 'cause since the other characters were kind of in limbo in one of the adventures, that if they hit that area, that these characters can come back as guest stars. If players, maybe if they have the time, can jump back in as guest stars. So
that's very cool.
and you can always do that. I think as we'll talk about, hopefully you all will get that impression that it is very much has that old school sensibility, and that you can do this open table, a West Marches style play, because of that, and because of how Jeff Talanian has created the world, I think, and how it's conducive to that type of, jump in when you want to, jump out. Like Daniel mentioned, he's doing this like kind of episodic serial type of adventure game, right? So, and I'm sure I don't know if you've had the same players, but have they rotated, or have you had new players? I guess that's a good question.
I've had new players join, and some old players have stepped away for a bit, whether or not they get back in before we end. But yeah, it's really great. Usually, when possible, they try to do it between adventures, so it kind of makes sense. But obviously, schedules, as you say. But it's really interesting. I say travel around because it's such a really cool world. And I was this last part, I wanted them to hex crawl a little bit, just briefly, a couple sessions, because we didn't really do that. A lot of times, I do the Conan thing where it's like, okay, a year and a half has gone by. You've been working for a shipping company, and now you're in this new area when there's not work. So you guys are going to be ashore for 3 months. So you decide to take adventure. You heard these rumors, and then they just start from there. But hex crawling through Hyperborea is really fun. And there's I don't know if you know about this, but I'll send you a link. There's a reference. God, what's it called? It's like somebody Ben. I'm so bad with names. Ben something or other put together a wandering monster chart, if you will, for Hyperborea. But it's But it's like this, you roll like 3d6 to see what might happen, and then depending on where you are and what terrain, it's not just monsters, it could be like a weird effects, because it's in Hyperborea, of course, it could be all kinds of things. So like, as they were traveling, I was using this, they ran into like 100 ape men, cavalry that tried to kidnap some of their NPC hirelings and stuff. It was really pretty wild. It's like that's the kind of stuff that I think really works well in Hyperborea, So yeah.
So let's talk about the world. I think I had some points that we were going to talk about, and I'm just kind of riffing here with Daniel, in that it looks like the world is what we're going to talk about first. If that's cool with you. So what about the world, Daniel? What about the world makes it like, man, I want to dive into this?
So one thing I think that is a really strong point, which I can maybe with some players, if they're used to other systems, might be a downside at first, is that I like that the world is very human centric. It's there's different races of man, so you've got cultural differences, but everybody's human, which I think actually works really well, because then the world, when you do encounter something unusual, it feels unusual because you're people, if that makes sense. So that was one of the first things that drew me in, was that it is human centric, and it is, I mean, it's sword and sorcery, but it is a little bit high magic, I would say. Kind of grittiness of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's definitely a sword and sorcery world, and I do like the human centricness. There are a couple races of man that are a little different, Atlanteans and Hyperboreans, but for the most part, it's like various cultures from all over the world. And I don't know if I haven't dove in, and I haven't asked Jeff Talanian himself. Maybe if I see him at North Texas, I can ask him. But to me, it seems like there's different cultures, right? So there's like a Thracian culture, kind of Greek, Ixian, which is kind of Near East, Black Sea. There's Hellenistic cultures, so that is reference to Greek/Roman cultures, all sorts. And in the third edition, they've added many more, right? So Viking, for example, Scandinavian cultures. And it seems to me, I don't know if you've ever read Janissaries by Jerry Cornell, but it's almost like what happens in that book, just I'll spoil it for people, is aliens take people from different times in history and take them to this other planet for their own reasons. But in a way, and that's almost what happened is that in Hyperborea, all these cultures have been transported to this strange world, right? And the other weird thing about the world, and maybe you can comment on it since your characters have gone all over the place, is it's flat, right? So it's a flat Earth, and I guess is it the closer you get to the edge, the warmer it gets? Is that correct?
That's correct? Yeah.
Yeah. So
sorry, because it's supposed to be like the center where the mountain is supposed to be like the North Pole, right? It got ripped off our Earth, if you will. So like as you go out towards the edges, you're going south, which is really weird when you're trying to give directions when you're hex crawling. Because people always think up on the map is north, but actually in is north. So that is a little bit tricky.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of maps, so that's definitely something that drew me to Hyperborea was like the world map. Fantastic cartography. To me, and they've always had really good cartography in all their adventures, and as well as and now in the new version, they're going to have a whole atlas for the world that kind of breaks up the different sections, which I think is cool. And it's different. It's unique. Like Daniel said, like it's like they pulled the top of Earth away and transported all these different cultures there. You could fall off the edge of the world. The north is all this huge mountain range, and and I think as odd as the world is, it doesn't feel like I feel like when I look at some maps in some worlds, like why this desert is in the middle of nowhere makes no sense to me sometimes. But I feel like they did a great job of making things make sense, right? There's no, to me,
it does, yeah.
The geography makes sense as bizarre as it is, right?
Yeah, and like if you look at like the mountain ranges, like they have like hills lead up to them. I mean, they definitely thought about making the map feel real, as far as I can tell. I mean, I'm no master map maker, but it does look and feel real, and you can, like you said, you can fall off the Earth, which is really cool. I also love, and I try to bring up a lot, the fact that it's got that big bloated sun and 2 moons, and like currently we started in year 7, which is the summer, where basically there's almost no darkness, and now we're in year 1 and there's almost no light. So like there's this whole weird. There's like this 13-year cycle. I guess I mean I know you know that, but maybe people are listening. So each year, as we would call it, like 360 days or however long they are, is a part of a season, and there's 13 of those make up a Hyperborean year, which is 13 years. So you've got this like weird cycle. So they've actually only been adventuring for like half a Hyperborean year, but it's been like Earth years or whatever it's been. I guess they're on one. That's let me do some math. That's 7, I think. So they've been traveling for 7 years. And now they have to deal with the fact that it's like negative 40 degrees when they're crossing the plains, and they're like big mammoth skins and, all this other stuff going on. Whereas when they started, they were like in loincloths in the desert, like, having heat stroke if they were out too long because there was no respite from the sun. Well, not heat stroke because it doesn't get that hot there, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. And I think that's really cool that I'm glad that you kind of dived into the weird, I guess we're going to say weird a lot in this podcast, I'm sure. But the 13-year cycle, and I mean, I haven't run a campaign long enough to try to get into that, but it's definitely something I want to do, is to really show that the bizarre, cycle, celestial heavens thing and it really influences like what I think it probably could even influence like what kind of encounters you might have, because there's some creatures that might only come out during the cold times, and others that are they driven underground when there's too much sun, type of thing. So I think you can really use the environment in the world, the climate in the world, to really a fantastic effect. So and I think that was it's intentional, clearly, right? So.
Yeah, this is the first campaign I've ever run. I mean, I've run long campaigns before in other systems, 5e being the one I've probably run the longest. And I never really, it was always just kind of spring or fall. It's like you don't worry about the weather too much unless it becomes a point of the story. But in this game, I really feel like it is part of it. And I try to use it. I really keep a tight calendar. I watch the seasons. And sometimes I have to make decisions. I'll be like, well, if you go now, it's going to be negative 40 degrees. You could wait 6 months or whatever, but that might be a problem. So they have to make choices, and they're running a shipping company, so that matters because ice and stuff. So, Yeah, it really the weather and especially the darkness and the light, I think, are a huge part of the game. And one thing that I think is interesting about it is that if you're running modules like I am, and I didn't realize this when I first started doing it, the modules change, right? Because if you have a module where somebody's going into the mountains and it's the summer, that might be very doable. But if it's the mountains and it's the winter, that's going to be incredibly treacherous because of the temperature changes and the darkness and all that. So yeah, it matters.
Definitely a consideration, and I like how they put that in there. Obviously, it's always your campaign, and these things are optional. But I think it makes the world very living and robust when you do that. Consistent, I think, is a cool is a word to use too. It's very consistent. I mean, we have a myriad of different campaign worlds to play in, and your mileage may vary at the different ones that you look at. But some are not very consistent, and it kind of breaks, for me at least, verisimilitude. So, have you traveled to any of the little pocket places in Hyperborea? So, for example, they have like Joe Salvatore's product. I mentioned Joe Salvatore, Raven God Games. In Mu, like Fane of the Serpent Goddess. You haven't looked at that, or you traveled to there? Because they have. That's the other cool thing about the world is.
Hold on. That was the Lemurian one, or is it another one?
Is it Lemuria?
Well, that's you're talking about officially published stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that was the same Joe Salvatore. Yeah, we were in that one. That was awesome. And actually, when you go there, it's super warm. So it's right at the edge of the world, and it was like 100 degrees, and they were dying. I mean, it was terrible for them. So it's like you can't wear metal armor, without having heat stroke, and you deal. Oh, that's a really good module, actually. Oh yeah, that was. I didn't realize it was the same guy.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorites. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. So so that's kind of what Kevin did. He kind of had like a little pocket place, like I said, called Tule, and he put it like we were on a ship. Just FYI, just as an aside, if you ever play a game with Kevin Madison, never get on a boat. Every time I've played, it always there's some catastrophe. But that's how we got to Tule, which was hella cool. We shipwrecked and all that, and I had to survive in this new world. But you could do that in Hyperborea because it has this kind of I guess flexibility. I could think is a cool word. I think you could even put. I think there's been talk on the Discord, on the Hyperborean Discord too, of putting the Jack Hayes product Caverns of Thracia somewhere in Hyperborea because it could totally work either as a pocket place, or there's plenty of random islands out in the huge ocean too, right? So it's definitely flexible if you don't want to go through the modules. That's what I would say as a
100%.
A positive, right?
Yeah, and I think that it lends itself to that. So if you normally, like in any other system, like when I ran 5th edition, when I run original Dungeons & Dragons, when I run AD&D, when I run all those things, I usually just say, oh, it's the World of Greyhawk, and I just kind of say that, but I don't use anything from the World of Greyhawk that's actually part of that. I just call it that because that's what I remembered when I was a kid, and I make up everything. In this one, I actually use the world because there's enough detail there to get you going, but then you can fill it in. It doesn't feel forced. Every one of these places, like if you read Lemuria, in the actual book, the 2nd edition book, it's only like, 10 paragraphs. So if you didn't use the module, you could create your own world or your own idea around it. But then if you use the module, you get extra stuff. So, yeah. And dinosaurs. Spoiler.
I think and ninjas too, right? Ninjas riding dinosaurs?
Yeah, there you go. Maybe.
All right, so let's talk about now. I mean, I think that's great about the world, right? It's flexible, it's consistent. You can do your own thing, and they have a whole host of modules that I think, much like maybe this is the last point on the world, is much like I think the older games like AD&D, Greyhawks, and specifically, right? They didn't have like a big. They created the modules, and then these kind of created the lore of the world. The lore was evolving based on the adventures, which I think is kind of a cool homage to the way that old school design, the philosophy of old school design, is you didn't have this giant world book necessarily. These adventures kind of gave you the feel for the world. Would you agree or disagree, or how, in your experience, I mean, how has that happened, or has that happened?
Yeah, 100%. And what's interesting about it is that people go back to it, right? So like you've got, again, like we started in Zimbala, which is also a great module. And that module, if you read it in the book, it says like 2 paragraphs about Zimbala. Oh, it's this thing and this. But then once you play in it, you've got this added stuff that you want to. And then from that, what I did was I looked around because, of course, they did other things because they were exploring. And there was other things in the book that they only had a paragraph or two about, but there was no module. So then I had to add my own stuff to it. So, now I have my own lore. So if they do make a module about some of these places, I might not use it because I've already got my own, or I'll just take little things about it. And I think it's great because it allows people, not that any game doesn't allow you to do that, but it's designed to be built upon as opposed to being a fully fleshed out area. I think is the best way that I would say it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not. It's like I always felt. It's not crowded, right? So I always felt like some of these already pre-existing worlds are crowded, right? Like you throw a stone and you hit a high level NPC, type of thing. I guess that's another thing is that it's the player. The world is designed to be player focused. You don't have a lot of stats on high level NPCs that are chucking fireballs and stopping time everywhere. It's very much the player's world.
I agree with that 100%. And in all the modules, and I've run all of them, even the higher level ones, most of the people you encounter are like 0 level or first level people because that's the way the world is supposed to be. If you're a high level adventurer, you're pretty unique. I mean, there's definitely monsters that are really hard to kill, but most of the NPCs are not that. Like you very rarely run into a really high level NPC. So and none of them are like controlling areas. Like you go into a Cromarium and it's not like, well, these NPCs run the whole place and you just have to bow down to them. It doesn't really have that. You kind of create your own vibe the way you want to do it, which I like a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the world's great, and I guess we both agree with that. So,
it makes sense. Sorry, it kind of makes sense, right? Because whenever you hear Jeffrey talk about it, he developed the world first, right? He was developing a setting, and then he realized that in order to make the setting really, I'm now loosely interpreting based on things he said. It seems like he built a game around it but to assist in that world. Like he was like, I'm building this setting, and then he was like, you know what though, this setting would have these things, and as he did it, he basically built a game because he realized it would have these kind of player characters and this and that. So that's really why. I mean, my understanding of how he kind of created the whole thing was he started off with the setting first, not the game. If that makes sense.
Right. So, like for my shadows out of Vinland, I'm putting them in a place called Port Zangarius, which I think is going to be my segue. Yeah, it has the cool masks. So this is my cool segue onto the fiction. So Port Zangarius, to me, even the word Zangarius, it's kind of an amalgamation of Cordova in Zingara and Missantia in Argos in Robert Howard's Conan world. So it definitely has that vibe, pirates and scum and villainy, but with this trapping of society there that exists as well. And I thought it was a great place to put it. And the good thing, as Daniel has said, there's like only a few paragraphs on it, so you can do whatever the hell you want, giving you a lot of flexibility. So I've kind of done some of that in at least in my mind. I don't want to spoil too much for players who might listen, but you could. It's neat, and I think the cool thing is that the inspiration is from Howard. So it's a sword and sorcery world, and let's talk about the fiction. I think to me, the main influences are Robert Howard from Conan, H.P. Lovecraft, because you have a lot of otherworldly, unnatural mythos allusions. Even some of the gods that they have in the world are mythos, known mythos deities, Cthulhu, Sagotha, however you pronounce that, the frog, and then Clark Ashton Smith, right? So the space-time, probably the weird cosmology of the world comes from Smith with all of his very poetic descriptions of traveling through space-time, and I think that's what sets the tone. Really?
Yeah, 100%. And if you read, so most of Clark Ashton Smith's stuff is actually available for free because it's in public domain. There's actually a website. It's called like the Dark something or other. But if you just Google, you'll find it.
Put
it
that link in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll find it and I'll send it to you. So if you don't know it already, it's called something like Dark Cabinet or something. But it's got a lot of his stuff. And I actually took all those down, all the ones that were in the Hyperborea cycle, and I printed them all and read them as I was running them the adventures. And to get myself the right feel. And it's funny how many things are in Hyperborea. like very much the fall of Hyperborea. If you read the background with the whole moving away from the gods like Apollo, and then starting to worship the frog god and using the drugs and falling into decadence, like that's all in Clark Ashton Smith's writings. It's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's clear there's a really good influence, and I guess it's pretty much sword and sorcery, though, right? It's not. I mean, and maybe any sort of pastiche that's been done based on the works of those authors. I would say that there's probably like some influence also from Fritz Lieber, the very much the
Oh,
but
yeah.
so like I mean you could totally do like a buddy game, right? So and that's kind of what
Yeah.
I'm running in the Shadows game that I'm you have like two heroes that it can are the main stars of the tale, right? So Fritz Lieber is definitely a strong influence too, I would say.
No, 100%. And I actually think, as much as I love Dungeon Crawl Classics, which I know is also influenced by those things, I think Dungeon Crawl Classics goes further in the gonzo, just by the nature of the game. This one stays a little bit more level. So I think that if you want to really run like a Fritz Lieber type game, I think I would probably use this system, or this world anyways. Although I say that, and I have the the Fritz Lieber box set for the Dungeon Crawl Classics in the back, unopened.
Right.
Uh,
Well, I don't know.
Well, because some of those things like patrons and stuff, for the characters aren't really in Astonishing Swordsman, but you can make that up, and you can use that. I just think that the variety of the human centricness of it, the kind of weird science stuff that happens, like there's flamethrowers from the Atlanteans and airships and stuff like that you can find, all like lost technology. This idea that like the Earth is like older is really cool. It comes from a lot of like say this weird fiction authors.
Right, like Lynn Carter and Elsbrog de Camp, and that type of Atlantean cycle, as well as Howard's Cull.
And very specifically, because I was talking about this book from Barrett, this book here, Dwells in the Mirage, is all about the god Kraken, which is a cockerel, which is actually in Hyperborea, and it's very. If you read this book and you read what they talk about in Hyperborea with that god and everything, it's from this book. I mean, it is exactly this. And when I was reading the book, I was like, oh, haha. And there's even a valley that's on the map that to me seems like it's the same place it should be. So that's where I'm setting the adventure. So, because my players already know that because they've got information, so I'm not giving away too much. But it's like a lost valley and Kraken or Kakaru, the dweller, and it's really interesting. And it's clear that he didn't just take like read books and then come up with a lot of stuff offhand. He really does a lot of throwbacks. Jeffrey, that is. So which is very cool because you when you're reading the fiction, you're like, oh, I know what that is, and it's really a fun if you're a reader and you're into that kind of stuff. Anyways,
yeah. So I think you could take one of these books, like you've mentioned, the Clark Ashton Smith cycle, the Hyperborea Tales, and A. Merritt's book here, and you could read them and then run them, and they would not be out of place in a Hyperborea game. And a lot of times we try to fit some of the fiction that we really like into our setting of choice. And if you really like sword and sorcery, and you find there's a cool story from either short stories from Howard or novels from other people, then you could run that. You could totally. Yeah, I think actually one of the players said in one scene in one of the modules that we've run, he's like, "Oh, that scene, that's from Clark Ashton Smith's book."
Yeah.
I remember that scene in the Clark Ashton Smith tale. So
that's crazy.
Totally fits in, which I think is really cool. Well, so we've been talking about like a lot of the fluff. So let's maybe switch gears here, Daniel, and get into like some of the meat of the game, because you'd have a great fluff and wonderful settings, but then the GM has to do a lot of prep work and leg work, and so what makes this attractive to the players, let's say.
Good.
Yes. Yeah. So, and I think what makes it attractive to the players, because players, DMs love fluff. I know I'm being general. It's a generalization. GMs love fluff because we know all the backstory. We want to know why the hell this happens, why it happens. The players want mechanics. I want to build my, badass, loincloth barbarian, right? So, but can we do that in Hyperborea? Talk about the character classes.
Yeah, I'd say yeah. So what they do here, again, I'm assuming that not everybody has played this. They don't have multi-classing, right? We talked a little about that. There's just a ton of classes. So you've got your four core classes: your fighter, magic user, or yeah, no, magician they call it, fighter, magician, cleric, and thief. And then you've got what 22 subclasses or something like that.
Yeah, I was
And
trying
they're
to count.
effectively they're effectively well-formed subclasses. So you were talking about your warlock earlier. That's like a fighter magic user heavy in the fighter, right? So like
Mhm.
you're as tough as the fighters for the most part, but you've got some magic. And then you've got other classes that are tougher, let's say in magic with a little bit of fighter. And then you've got like mixed classes that have like a little bit of thief and magic user or cleric. And there's also some classes that are kind of unique, like the shaman is pretty cool. I find that to be different than a lot of things. And the rune graver, I would say, is another pretty
Yeah.
specific. They've got the huntsman, which is kind of like a beast master, where you can have your animal companions, but it's not like a ridiculous magical thing. Oh, I shouldn't say ridiculous. I don't want to make judgments, but it's not a magical thing. It's like somebody who's just trained to deal with animals. So they can tame animals and stuff, which allows them to then have, like in this book that I'll refer to again, because as I've been sitting here, one of the characters controls a bunch of wolves, and it's clear that she just has a real affinity towards animals.
Mhm.
It's not really like a magic spell. She's just she's basically a huntsman. So I think that kind of stuff is really interesting from the player's point of view. It gives them a lot of options.
Right. So just to give numbers here, so there are 7 fighter subclasses, 5 magician subclasses, cleric there's 5, and for thief there are also 5. So what is that? 22. 22 subclasses, and the base 4 that gives you that many options to find the character class. And what do they do? I think since it's a human centric world, and I think what he wanted I don't know, I've never interviewed him, but I'm speculating that in other in an AD&D game you have multiple species, so elves, etc., and you multi-class them to get like the fighter thief, the fighter magic user. But in here, since you have the human centric and we're not multi-classing, we want to stay consistent with the backbone of the AD&D rules. Then we have these different subclasses that take on characteristics of, so like for example, warlock, fighter, magic user. There's also like a magic user thief. I think the purloiner or leisure domain or whatever, or and there's like a cleric thief. There's all sorts of combinations that a player who wants to diversify away from the base 4 classes can then find their little their niche, to get into. I think, and I mean,
Yeah, and it's subtle. I think that's really the key. Is it works for the world, if that makes sense. Like
right,
like your warlock, I'd have to look it up. I have the PDF here. Like I think the warlock is a fighter magic user, but I don't
right,
think I think they fight as tough as a fighter, but they
yes,
can't. I think they can't wear all the armor, right? There's like a little bit of a difference. Like they're only up to like medium armor or something. So
right.
they're not exactly a fighter magic user. And I think
Mhm.
it actually works better, at least in my opinion, than multiclassing. I'm not a big multiclasser, so I put that on the table up front.
Right, because then I think in multi-classing, right, you have to split your XP, and this way
That's
you
true.
feel like you progress upwards, in one particular class, and you can become pretty powerful and specialized. And I think they've done he did a great job. Jeff did in designing these different classes to kind of fit all those classic, let's say AD&D first edition combos that you might see, but now in a human centric world, and now you just have one class that you can focus on, and that gets the benefits of those combos from years before. But now you don't have to split your the focus of your time. I think as a player,
Yeah.
it really helps. I mean, I played a warlock. I think Rune Graver is a really fun class to play as well.
Yeah.
I would say, I think because I played a warlock the longest, it's probably my favorite. Do you have a favorite class?
Yeah, Warlock is definitely one of the best classes. I would say, like, I mean, as far as like versatility is, having run, I think we've played almost every class in the campaign.
Oh, neat.
And I will say too that this game is not balanced really. Like there are some classes that are definitely mechanically better than others, and I don't have a problem with that. I know some people don't really like that. Like Barbarian is much better than many other classes, like as far as the scope of what you get with it. But it's also hard to qualify for. But I would say
And
that
there's a
Bard,
XP penalty. There's an XP penalty too, really.
That's right.
becoming a
Yeah, of
barbarian.
course you're paying. Yeah, you're paying more in XP. I mean, but even the straight up fighter. That being said, the straight up fighter is pretty darn good because they get
Mhm.
2 weapon masteries right up front, which is huge. So yeah, if you take a fighter, like a first level fighter, they get 3 attacks around with their specialized weapon right off the bat against first level and below enemies. Which again, as we talked about before, in the world, most people aren't high level.
Right.
So you are gonna, I know that's true at AD&D where you get that bonus against like low level characters, but in AD&D, most of the time, by the time you're 5th, 6th, 7th level, you're not fighting first level people. If you look at those modules, like the bartender's a 7th level ranger for some reason in all these
Yeah.
AD&D modules. So I actually think that he does that better here. It's
Yeah.
like, why is that ranger there? It's like, how did he get 1,000,000 experience points and like all that gold, and now he's working as a barkeep? But anyways,
Right. Yeah,
bad
because I
gambling,
think
guess.
the characters are the stars of the show, and they have all these class
Yeah.
combinations. You really,
Oh yeah.
it really makes like the use of henchmen and hirelings kind of a, a cool addition, and
Yeah.
it helped. I mean, I think it helps promote that. I mean, at least in gameplay, I
agree.
can't put my finger on why. Maybe you have some insight on that, but I just feel like, because they don't have to like again, because they're the star. They feel like players. I think feel like this is this is my show. If we were to have a series, like a Marvel Universe series, this would be my show, and I have all these companions or friends that aid me. But it's my it's the star. I'm the star of the show, right? It's like I think.
Yeah, I agree with you there, and I think one thing they do, which is very interesting, is it's different. I think than a lot of things, is they do put a big focus on what we'll call hirelings and mercenaries more so than henchmen, right? So like you get like my group has hired tons. I mean, probably the course of the campaign, probably 20 to 50, not all at once. Like 0 level and first level spearmen and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But people for the boats. And that's mostly what you're hiring. When you get a higher level, you can have what's called a henchman, which is a classed character that can gain experience points, but that's like totally a different thing. And it's almost like an apprentice. So most of the people you're bringing into the fold aren't high level characters, like you say. So you really do get to be the star for the most part. The high level NPCs are pretty rare. I mean, my characters happen to have one traveling with them right now because they picked her up in like 2 modules ago, and they've just been treating her well. So giving her magic items and stuff, so she's hanging out. But for the most part, you're right. Like this does seem to have a very strong draw or whatever to let people do that or have people do that versus what say where you're picking up henchmen where they're taking up half your experience points and stuff like that. In some games. So I think that's actually a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's cool that it works. In this game. I don't know what else to say about character classes. I mean, I think
yeah. I think that one thing
I'll
say is
it's an attractive part of the game to me, right?
I think so. I think a lot of people like the variety, and I know I have players like my one player, Crystal. She's always she's played the most characters, partially because of character death, and partially because she just switches sometimes. But because she's always wanted to try these different ones. She's like, oh, this is a cool class, and she'll try it out because there's just so much variety, and I think that there is a lot of options. I'm a simple person myself. Like I would probably just play the four classes if I had my choice. But
yeah, and
I think that players do like it. You can, yeah. It even recommends actually to do that in the book. It says if new players or if you're a new GM, to just have the 4 core classes while you're learning the system, which I think is pretty cool. Yeah.
All right, so let's get into the system. Nominally, it uses like the AD&D kind of backbone, but it definitely, I feel, in gameplay, and we can probably discuss specifics, but it makes things a little easier than AD&D. I think.
100%. I think it's mostly because of the organization of it. I think it's really put together well. The classes are given a little bit more depth, I think, than AD&D classes right off the bat, which I think helps people play different classes. Like magicians can have familiars, they can write scrolls, so they give them a little bit more something to do. The fighters have the weapon mastery, but it's not deeply into like the 2nd edition, tons of skills and proficiency stuff. It's pretty simple, so it's fast to use. Yeah.
Yeah, and there aren't any skills.
That's right.
Right? You have like maybe a background career type of thing, but there are no skills. And I think they go around. I mean, I think a mechanic that they use to me that works really well. So like if you need a character to, if you just don't let them know what they know, but you feel like you need a role, you can do these tests of, right? You could just, they have these tests of strength, dex, and con that you can use to say, well, then it's just that you're crossing this river that's going very fast, and I just need to see you can take it, and you just have them roll, not their swimming skill, but a test of strength or whatever. And it's a simple D6, which I think is really neat. And they also do that in a way there's no subsystems. I think that's what maybe makes it.
Yeah,
faster.
That's a good point. No subsystems.
There's no subsystems. For example, you don't have to break out your percentile dice and look on another table for your thieves abilities, right? Thieves or monks abilities, right? So they use a D12 system, and this is the same mechanic that barbarians use for their special abilities. And it's a D12, and it's a roll under on the D12, so it gives you a good range, and it does improve with level, but it's not. Yeah, it doesn't seem to me it's a disconnect like that some people have talked about, or about why do you have a different way to do X, and you can just like what 3.5 did eventually is everything on a D20, right? So I think Jeff Delanian has tried to streamline, I think is probably the best term, streamline some of these mechanics so they feel consistent and they're not like too different than the normal way you do things.
Yeah, I agree. I like the D12 system. I think it's good, like you say, most things. Like if a barbarian has a climb thing, it'll be like a thief of the same level for the most part. Yeah. And what I like about that personally, as a player, is I like that it relies on the player character more than the thing you're trying to achieve. And I know some people don't like this. In other words, like if you're playing 5th edition, you set a DC based on the lock. Here, you pick the lock based on your skill. And I actually think it's a subtle difference, but I think it's a big difference. The hero they're as heroic as they are, not as heroic as the task, if that makes sense.
Okay.
The other thing I want to say too is I use that test thing on all the ability scores. I keep meaning to, because it's not listed there, but it's consistent. So like if somebody wants to know something, or they want to read a writing they can't read, but they have a similar language, I might say, well, make a test of intelligence. So it's a really easy system. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think actually in the 3rd edition he has like something that that's not like in the main rules, but like there's a little paragraph in the 3rd edition where if you wanted to do what you just described, this is how you would do it, which is exactly how you described. So it's logical, right? It seems like the rules are logical,
it makes sense. Yeah,
and I would say that we always get these like GM screens for every single game we have, but I would say that as far as stuff on the screen, the Hyperborea screen, everything can fit on there, and I know the book is big and could be intimidating, but you really can just use the screen, and I think that's great kudos to design, and because the game is streamlined enough, you could do that, right? You have your reaction roll, your morale, your turn undead, and all this is on the same thing, organized very well. And maybe that's what you said is like it's well organized. It's a well organized game, I guess.
It is. I actually told him I saw him at ShowerCon. I was like, I think that's the first time I saw him after I got the screen. I said, I think your GM screen is one of the best ones I've ever used. It's really well organized. And what I actually did was I took it and PDF of it, and I cut it up and I made it the same dimensions as my screen, like my monitor. So when I'm running the game, I just have it behind my window. And I just drop all my windows down, and I'm able to run the game with almost never looking at the book, unless it's a spell or a monster or something like that. But that's different.
Yeah, for spot rulings, you always have to do that. Yeah. We can't remember anything, age and memory and all that.
Yeah, well, because the screen has all the weapons. It's got travel. It's really a well done screen, and I recommend it a lot. Actually, if you're going to get the game, I recommend getting the screen because it's very useful.
Yeah, but that's it also harkens back to like how well organized and well designed this is, that you can actually fit all that on a 3-panel screen, right? You could fit what you need to run the game on a 3-panel screen. I think that's a plus for the way, with the robustness of the rules, and how smooth the gameplay goes.
Yeah, when I rented a GaryCon, I just took the screen with me. I mean, I have the PDF on my phone if I really needed it, but the screen is the only thing I took as the DM in my adventure, which had the monsters in it, so I didn't have to do that.
That's I don't how many games can you say you can do that with? You'd be hard pressed.
Yeah.
Right. So all right, so if I were to play devil's advocate, Daniel, there is one thing that people always kind of when they see it, they're like, and they might get a bit agitated about it, and that's the combat system. And I know they have a 3rd edition, but let's talk about the 2nd edition combat system. I mean, it does use THAC0, and some people that THAC0 is a deal breaker for some people. I can't help that.
That's true, yeah.
But then there's this 2-phase system. Mm-hmm. So I like procedural. I like.
Me too.
I like it. I think I personally think it speeds up gameplay. Declaration of actions helps the player already know what they're going to do. Many times, I think in games for me for 3.5 on up, the delay and the slowness of combat is all the options that the player has because they haven't thought about it ahead of time. So if you kind of get an idea of what you want to do, then you're kind of ready to go when it happens. So the procedural is in Hyperborea is melee, missile, magic, move. And you want to talk about the 2-phase system and how that is implemented? And then we can go.
Yeah, exactly. I'll talk about that because I'm running 2nd edition right now because I didn't want to switch in the middle of the campaign. So you declare actions, which I agree. I think it helps a lot, and I'll kind of I'll try to handle the problems that people say there are with that as I go. So you go around the table and you're just like, what do you want to do? Spell, missile, movement, or or they say some other action. And then what people often think is, well, if I said melee and then the person next to me kills that enemy with their bow, well, actually melee goes first. I said missile, and then the person ahead of me kills that enemy with their sword. They charge up and kill them. Now I can't do anything. Well, first of all, I don't have a problem with that, but let's assume that you do have a problem with that. This is where I think the 2nd phase comes in really nicely because it's easy enough to say to somebody when they want to change their action, okay, you'll just go 2nd phase, just say what you want to do. And it kind of, and again, I hate to use the word realistic, but it gives you that thing where it's like, because when you're playing a game that's like these 10-second rounds and everybody's like going in order based on rolling a d20, and to me, it like often doesn't make sense. It's like, okay, so you wouldn't be aware of everything going on around you, so you can observe the whole table. And again, I know it's not realistic is a silly word to use, but I think it makes more sense for you to make your judgment of what you think you want to do. And then if you want to change your mind, you take what would effectively be a little bit of a penalty, which is you're going to go a little bit later. And honestly, if you lose initiative, it doesn't matter anyways, right? So it only is...
It's group initiative.
It matters. Yeah, it's group initiative, right? D6. So you got the 2 phases. So and what you can do with it, too, is you could say something like, okay, well, I want to charge forward and attack this guy. Or you might say, you might have a bow, and you might be like, all right, I'm going to move back, and then I'm going to shoot with my bow because they're getting too close. Or if you're going to cast a spell, you can't move at all, right? So you might say, I'm going to cast a spell. You could do all sorts of things, and I think that, like most things, when you're first learning it, it seems a little clunky. But once you have it down, I actually find it to be much faster than everybody rolls their own initiative and goes in order. I find it to be really efficient, and I can't think of a time that somebody ever was like, oh, I felt like I didn't get to do what I want to do because this is a system, which is, I think, the complaint that most people make. Like they are afraid they're going to lose their turn or something, but I've never seen that happen. So,
right, yeah. I haven't seen that happen either. And I know when I played with Kevin Madison, we did the two-phase system, and at first you're like, oh, how does this really work? But then when you say, oh, I would like to, Kevin, I want to do this, and then you're like, okay, well then this is what happens in the first phase, and then the resolution is in the second phase, and it kind of breaks things up very nicely and in an organized manner, and combat is pretty thrilling and dynamic, I would say, because of that. Now they got rid of the two-phase system in the 3rd edition, but really I would contend it's a hybrid, because you do all the melee, magic, and missile, and then move and anything else. So if you incorporate a move in any of your actions, then you're going to go more or less in the second phase. So even though it's just one phase, but so you can.
Yeah. You
So
go at the end.
So if you're already fighting in melee, that will be resolved first. But if you then need to move up to somebody to attack, then we resolve the fights that are happening, and then in the next phase you can move up, and just like in the second edition, move up to half your move and attack. So
Right.
still,
I guess and I think they allow you to spellcast and move in the new edition, which does change a bit. But here's the thing. This is why I think this is not exact. I know it's kind of a hybrid, but the reason why I like the two-phase system better is because it's a player choice. Because two phases, I guess I should make it clear, because maybe it's not clear. People listening, phase one happens for both sides before phase two happens. So if you say something like, let's say you're using a bow, and you're like, I want to charge forward and attack that guy with my battle axe now. I might say, that's fine, but you're going to have to go second phase because you got to if you want to put the bow away, right? If you want to just drop it, whatever. But if you want to actually stow your bow because you're standing on this cliff near a lava, and you don't want to drop your bow in there because that's exactly what's going to happen. You're going to go second phase. Now they have to make a decision. Do I want to drop my bow and risk it so I can attack this person the first round to save the magician who's getting hit? Do I want to instead shoot an arrow because that's going to happen? Or do I do exactly that? I'm risking going after the enemy by doing this slower movement that I want to do. And I think you lose that in this system because unless you're doing melee, missile, you're not doing that, right? It's one whole side in third edition.
Oh no, I feel like it's a you go and then the side goes in each of the phases. That's kind of the way I've always.
Oh really? Oh okay. All right, then that does still keep that then. Oh, that's actually very interesting.
Yep.
I don't know. I'll have to. If that's the case, then what I'm saying isn't the same thing. But then it does remove charges, which we were talking about earlier before we started recording.
Yeah.
Which I actually really like charges, but
yeah, charges are pretty good in this game because right, it was a melee action, and now it's like a move plus melee action. Technically.
Yeah. So you're not going to get shot with a bow, basically. Well, I guess you could theoretically, but like if you charge up on somebody, you're probably going to be too close for them to shoot you with their bow, right? I don't know if that's technically in the rules, but like I think most people would rate it that way. If there's an archer there and you charge up with your battle axe, or at the very least you can cut him down before he shoots you with an arrow. I guess putting movement at the end means you wouldn't be able to do that.
Right. Yeah, I think there's some subtleties and some things to work out necessarily in the game, but I think combat works and whether it's two phase or this sort of hybrid, not move and move, then I think it still works pretty well.
No, my understanding from an interview that Jeffrey did before they actually came out with the third edition when he was just talking about it was that the reason why he changed it was because that's what everybody was doing anyways. Like most people, I shouldn't say everybody, a lot of people were not using the two-phase system anyways. They were just doing one phase. So he just said, well, I'm just going to change it. So there you go.
Make it consistent so people don't feel like, I know the Hyperborea police are going to come get me because I'm not doing it right.
Right. Well, I feel like that's funny because I think that's why a lot of rule changes happen in games as much as like, people like me that like the old rule are going to rage against it. Like, no, it's like they don't just change stuff arbitrarily. They're changing it because people are doing it that way. Usually that's usually the case.
Yeah. But I mean, I will say this though, with whether it's the two-phase system or the hybrid system, the move, I'll call it the not move system. I mean, the combat goes really fast. I mean, when I've compared, games, so when I've compared games to the more modern games where everyone rolls their individual initiative and then goes to at least Hyperborea, then I've been able to do several combats in a session as opposed to just one or two. Right. In our three, like because of how busy everyone is, our 3 to 4 hours tops. Usually it's like 3 hours sessions. I would say even 2 to 3 hour sessions that some of us get to play. The ability in 3 hours to do like 5 combats is fantastic.
Yeah,
and I think you can do that. It's a very smooth system. I think that's smooth and as well as being robust because you don't just have like run up and attack. There's like a whole host of other combat options that you do have. Some of them are class specific,
the advanced combat.
But some of them anyone can do, right? So I think that's
and some are very cool, like setting arrows and stuff that I haven't seen in other systems. I mean, maybe they are there, but
right? Or there's like for the fighter that can shoot and move, or move and shoot type of
Right,
thing.
or throw the axe and then
Yeah,
charge in.
that's
So
one.
if you
Throw
hold it
the
like a
axe
hand axe,
card.
yeah,
Yep.
that's so
Yeah.
cool.
Some
Yeah, a lot of
neat
flavor, you
things
know.
that a lot
Yeah,
of so that, and that totally fits in with the fiction, going back to
yep.
everything, and consistency being like a buzzword that we've been using. Is the world works with the fiction, the rules work with the fiction and the world, right? So it gives you
Yeah,
this.
and what I do with the advanced combat is just in case somebody looks at that and they're like, "Oh, that's a lot to learn." Is what I say is if you have a character that you think is going to do these kind of things, dual wielding or throw the axe and then charge in, you as the player need to learn how that works. And when you want to do it, we'll deal with it. Like I don't even know how to do all the advanced actions. Players that do them a lot, like my one player always set spear for charge. He knew all the rules, so he'd be like, "I'm setting my spear for charge." So if it worked out, then you'd be like, "Okay, this is how it works," and it's easy. I don't think you have to feel like you have to take all the rules into yourself. So I wouldn't worry about that for the advanced combat because there is a bit of it, but you don't need
Right.
to know all of it. Yeah.
But I think it's the game is also, to me, flexible enough that if you as the player say propose something to the GM, then there's enough in the rules to add that flexibility. It's not like things aren't concrete, and if and it messes up the game if you try to do something crazy, right? So I think things totally work. Like I think, like,
Yeah, there's enough rules so you know, as a GM, you have a pretty good idea, or a referee would be in this game. You have a good idea, like how you think it should be handled, by the way the rules, if the rule did exist, what it would be. But it's not so rigid that you feel like you have to follow exactly the rules. Yeah.
yep. That goes back to that sort of smooth play, right?
Yeah.
Quick play, smooth play, and that definitely shows in your actual plays. So,
Oh, thank you.
oh,
Also,
I think we've
I
given
just
you a
want to
lot.
mention, I guess, sorry, I want to mention because I just have it up on my screen. I keep looking at it. One of the things that really drew me to this game too was the art. The art in this game is really good, I think. And each new iteration, he keeps adding new artists and changing the style, and with different styles, I should say. And each one adds a little bit of flavor. But some of the original, like charcoal drawing art in this that was in the first edition, it's still my favorite RPG art anywhere.
Yeah.
Actually, the person that did my Bennett's Keep logo thing is the same person that did a lot of that art. I sought them out because of it. It's so
Oh,
gritty.
nice.
Like I'm looking at the fighter one right now, and he's there and he's got plate armor on. He's holding the guy, he chopped off somebody's head. Like this is some serious stuff. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
would
the
say
art
like
is another thing.
yeah, I would say like I definitely know like a player that was kind of new to Hyperborea that played in one of my games when he was looking through the book and he saw the that one picture with the assassin standing over the person that they just
Yes.
killed. He's like, I'm playing an assassin. I mean,
Yep, that was one of my favorite images in the book. It's so good.
yeah. So
Yeah.
right, so it's inspirational and evocative, and it really, like you said, draws you into the game. It's like has a nice gritty flavor, and then some of the 3-panel things. Like one of my favorite is on the player's guide in second edition, that when they're fighting the snake men and the giant snake, the iconic heroes.
Yes.
That's such a cool piece. I wish they'd make a T-shirt out of it.
Come on, Jeff.
So yeah. Well, I mean, I think we've tried to convince you, and I hope we've done a fantastic job, especially Daniel,
yeah.
not so much me, but especially Daniel, of convincing you to go out there and find a table to join Hyperborea and play. And if you're so inspired and inclined, they're definitely wonderful pieces of art in the books themselves. They're just really, actually, I would say they're even the adventures are laid out pretty well. Very classic, classic style, like a trifold, module type style that we so loved and grew up with. They give you that nostalgia. They have the maps on the panels or tables, and they're organized really well. And something actually that reminds me, when I'm reading the modules, sometimes you have box text everywhere, and a lot of the more recent or newer products, maybe that came about with second edition. But what I like is in the modules, when they just have a place that you need to describe as a referee, they have kind of tags for them, and then you as a referee can expand upon that, and you can be creative with it and dive into it as much as you want, which I think again goes back to the flavorful flexibility I would say that this game has.
Yeah, I guess one more thing, because I meant to say this before, and you just made, when you're talking about that, it made sense to me. Is that the way that the book is written is, it feels like an older book, like, and I don't, in all the best ways. Like, Jeffrey uses like kind of language that's reminiscent of some of this weird fiction and stuff. So it's written in a very kind of the book feels like something that like older, but in a good way, like not Gygaxian, you don't know what's going on, but like, you know, words that sometimes you have to pause for a second and be like, huh? Oh, you know, like that kind of stuff. And I love that. I love reading the book. It's actually a joy to read the book, which I don't get with a lot of rule
feel,
books.
right? Maybe
yeah, it has a literary feel. That's a good way to say it. Yeah,
very sophisticated language. You know, maybe you have to use a thesaurus to look up what that word means. But you know, that's exactly how, to me, Lovecraft, Smith, Howard, Merritt, etc. That's sometimes you got to look up these weird words in the book.
and I think that is a feature.
Cool. Yeah, it's a feature. You feel like I guess educated while you read this book. Well,
exactly.
Thanks, Daniel. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say, it's exactly. It just has a different feel. I can't think of another RPG that like has writing like that just feels like you're actually reading the type of fiction that it emulates. So to me, I think it just works really well. It's not dry, I guess is the way to say it.
Yeah. Well, I hope, like I said, we've convinced you. So I'm going to let Daniel have his final thoughts on why you should be playing Hyperborea.
Okay, sure. So I think that if you are into fantasy and you're into sword and sorcery, but you're not necessarily wanting to focus on what I think is kind of popular in some areas, like very grimdark. Like, you want to play in a game where your heroes can still really be heroes. They don't have to be, but they can be, but still fight like just amazing odds and a lot of a good, we'll say, a world that's fleshed out enough that you understand it, but not so much that you feel like you have to look in the book to riff on it. Then I think this is a really good option for a fantasy game. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I echo those sentiments that Daniel just said very eloquently. This is a game that, like, I always want to get to the table when I find the players to do it. And you know, like I said, it's been a backup game for us when people can't show up, because we can, with two people, you can just play. It's pretty flexible that way. But it seems like it's creeping up to become the main focus, and I really am excited to see how this Shadows Out of Vinland campaign goes.
It sounds really cool.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Daniel, for your time and for really discussing a game we both really love, Hyperborea, with me.
For sure. Anytime.
All right.